My name is Paul Raymond. This is Fiona Richmond. Fiona Richmond is starring in the West End farce Let's Get Laid, starting this Thursday night. If you enjoy, as I do, looking at nude ladies, please do come along. You shan't be disappointed.
Disgusting.
No, it's not disgusting. It's perfectly natural. If it's good enough for Lady Godiva, it's good enough for Fiona Richmond.
That's enough now. Enough fun. Get off.
Sorry, everyone.
You've had your laughs.
That was a clip from The Look of Love. Pleased to say we've been joined by its star, who is Steve Coogan. Steve, hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm very well. Very well, yes.
You're on posters everywhere, and you look extraordinary.
Well, I look different. I've got a moustache, and although it is my hair, well, it was my hair. My hair was long and blonde for a while, but as soon as the film was over, I chopped it all off.
I did assume that there were various hair pieces being made and wigs. So that's all your own work?
No. It's if you really want the wig
Yes,
detail,
I do.
I started off with very short hair. That was a wig. I had slightly longer dark hair in the 60s. That was a wig. I had very long blonde hair in the 70s. That was my hair. And I continued to have long hair that went a bit greyer. That was still my hair. And then the film ended.
That's an interesting way of telling the story of Paul Raymond via his hair. So The Look of Love is the movie. It's the story of Paul Raymond. It's the fourth time you've worked with Michael Winterbottom. Just tell us the story that you're telling us in this tale, please, Steve.
Well, it's the story of Paul Raymond, who was, without wanting to be too reductive about him, as his grandchildren are still around and very helpful with the film, but Paul Raymond was a northern working class lad, or lower middle class lad, who sort of avoided school and study and came down to London, became a bit of a spiv in the post-war years of austerity that's sort of sounding more and more familiar these days, and sort of wheedled his way into a position where he started doing a sort of vaudeville act, where he was a memory man who sort of where he bought a memory act off an old vaudevillian and had a glamorous assistant, and then one day I had the brilliant idea of asking his glamorous assistant to take all her clothes off, and suddenly he had a eureka moment and realised that men quite liked this, and so that became his sort of raison d'etre, really, and then he sort of went from there to sort of opening these sort of famous clubs and these magazines that were full of nudity and by today's standards, I have to say, appear rather quaint looking back. But he was someone who ended up owning most of Soho, and 2 weeks after the death of his daughter, from a drugs overdose, was named Britain's richest man. And when we discovered things like that, the sort of the inherent poetry of it made us, when we say us, I mean myself, Michael and Matt Greenhalgh, the writer, made us want to make a film about it. It seemed like an interesting story.
Yes, and to get to be Britain's wealthiest man, I think it was about 1992, wasn't it, that he achieved that?
Yes.
It is a fairly astonishing accomplishment for someone who, as you say a couple of times in the movie, comes off the boat from Liverpool with 5 bob in his pocket. Was it because he was a great entrepreneur, a great showman, property developer, pornographer? I don't know. Was it a combination of all those? What was it that made him so extraordinarily successful?
Well, I think he was the right place at the right time, and not being encumbered by any British notions of decency, whether they're good or bad. I think he just gave people what they want, and depending on your point of view, that can be both good and bad. But he, in a strange way, is a very Thatcherite success story, because he was someone who was driven by the bottom line, by business, and but the manner of his business being nudity and sex, something that sort of perhaps wouldn't have been something that appealed to the stalwart Thatcherite supporters.
No,
we know and love.
Yes, I can't quite imagine Mrs. T or any of her followers there, particularly in any of the clubs which are revealed in your film. But
they wouldn't admit to it.
Okay. Yes, fair enough. And the other people who might have had a problem, may still have a problem, would be arguments from the feminist side. Were you tempted at all to make any statements about gender politics?
I think if you start being polemical and wagging your finger, going, "Oh, isn't it awful the way he treated women?" You end up sort of patronising your audience. It's not about that; it's about depicting a man. And if you start saying it was, this was good, but that was bad, you show it all in all its. You try to be honest with a story and make it interesting. And that within that character and within the story, you'll find both good and bad. And as I say, if you're a feminist, you might find that you think, well, he was on the wrong side of that argument because he was exploiting women. But if you're someone who loathes and detests the puritanical, censorious nature of people like Mary Whitehouse, you'll think he was on the right side of that argument. So it's all, nuanced depending on where you are at any particular
Yes.
moment.
And were his activities, as far as were they all completely above board? Because there's clearly a sleazy side to the stuff that went on.
I think by and large, although there's you always can find a grey area. If you go through his books, I'm sure you'll find some irregularities. But by and large, he was above board, and that's why he had run-ins with the police, because he didn't get involved in paying backhanders to the police, and so eventually they tried to close him down, which ended up with a huge corruption trial in the 1970s, where a lot of policemen were exposed for taking, backhanders from. Surprise, surprise, that there are some corrupt policemen taking backhanders. That's how unfamiliar is that? Anyway, at the time that they were exposed and served time in prison, but it was only because he decided to meet them head on in the courts rather than roll over and pay the money.
David Walliams has a lot of fun here playing a vicar. Apparently he's legendary.
David Walliams always has a lot of fun.
Yes, that's right. And he's playing this vicar, Edwin Young, who I'm told is a Soho legend. I hadn't heard of him, but he is an extraordinary man, isn't he? He's almost like he's worth a film on his own.
Well, it's very interesting to us that we found out that Paul Raymond did employ a pastor for the spiritual guidance of his strippers. Which of course, I mean, when you find a fact like that out, you think, well, he employed a vicar whose job was to go in and counsel the strippers, and we thought, who can we cast in that role? And
didn't think very long though.
David Walliams virtually battered the door down to play that role, and found it very difficult to come into work and do scenes with lots of topless women. I think he arrived early most days, to be honest.
Quite nice to stop being Paul Raymond.
Yes, it was. It was very nice to stop being Paul Raymond, because it's it's like too much of a good. It's like sort of eating a whole Easter egg in one go. It sort of makes you feel a bit sick afterwards, even though it seems like a good idea at the time. He led a very nocturnal life, and when you make the film, you end up sort of simulating that, because you go into work in the morning to make the film. It would be daylight, but you'd go into a nightclub, or someone made it like a strip club at night, so with low lighting and fake cigarettes and drink and smoky atmosphere, and then you'd come out at the end of the evening, and it would be going dark outside, and you just come out, so you start to never see any daylight, and it's not healthy. At the end of filming, I just wanted to go for a walk in the hills and sort of breathe in some clean air and not see and counter the effect of hundreds of naked women by looking at middle-aged women in hiking gear.
But he's also not happy at the end, is he? I mean, he's not a happy man.
No, he's not, and it's sort of, we tried to avoid actually doing a morality tale, whereas if you mess about with nude women and porn, then you'll end up being very, very sad and depressed. But that's actually what happens. That's what inevitably we sort of you arrive at. But what we did try to do is to show that we didn't want to do a finger-wagging morality exercise. What we also wanted to show was that in the midst of it, in these transient moments, there's this glorious, enjoyable, sort of visceral, colourful world that he occupied. That has this appeal, but it's very transient, of course, and. The tragedy is is not being able to distinguish between sex and love. because they're different.
Yeah. The Alan Partridge film arrives in cinemas, I think, in the summer. Is that right? Is there anything you can tell us about that? And how did the filming of that coincide with the filming of the Paul Raymond movie?
There's no nudity in the Alan Partridge film. Sorry to have to tell you.
I think I'm quite reassured by
Quite
that.
reassured. Oh, that's actually a lie. Actually, you do see my bottom. Well, not mine, Alan's, but on loan from me.
Is it a stunt bottom?
It's not. It's my real. It's not. It's not. Yeah. No, it's not. It's not. It's not a selling point.
So I'm not. I'm just scrolling back. Do we actually see your bottom in The Look of Love?
I think you do. Yes.
Oh, do we?
Yeah, you do.
That's
yeah.
quite enough.
Yeah. It was. It was better lit in The Look of Love. In the Alan Partridge, it's very harsh lighting. It's not attractive at all. But what can I say about the Alan Partridge film? Well, it's finished and we're editing it, and I think it's very funny. But that's just me, and it's set in Norwich. It all happens in Norwich and Norfolk, and it's got Lynn, his assistant, played by Felicity Montague, and Simon Greenall plays Michael the Geordie, and who's the other regular? Dave Clifton, played by Phil Cornwall, the fellow DJ of Alan's. So they're all in it, and there's lots of new characters, new actors, and it all takes place at the fictional North Norfolk Digital in Norwich, and it's a lot of fun, and it's some great set pieces in it, and we had a real blast making it, and it made a change from working with Michael Winterbottom.
And yes, absolutely,
also very subtle and nuanced, and we're trying to avoid subtlety or too much nuance in the Alan Partridge film.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. Look of Love comes out on the 26th of April. We appreciate you speaking to us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Simon.